New on Curiosity Stream.
I'm James Burke. I'm going to take you on a journey through time.
James Burke's visionary series returns, reimagined for our time.
Now, this is all uncharted territory.
The Washington Post hails Burke as one of the most intriguing minds in the Western world. The New York Times raves he careens from one great moment in history to another.
Where do we want to go from here?
Experience all new connections.
So what's the next connection?
With monthly, annual, and bundled plans, find the one that works for you at CuriosityStream.com.
Check out great deals throughout the store at Safeway. This week at Safeway, get mega packs of USDA Choice boneless beef chuck roast for $3.97 per pound with digital coupon, limit 2 packages. Plus, Hass avocados are 10 for $10 member price. And get Fuji apples for just 77 cents per pound with digital coupon. Also this week at Safeway, get selected varieties of Lucerne milk gallons for the member price of $3.99 each when you buy 2. Visit Safeway.com or head into your local store for more deals.
Welcome to Pretty Lies and Alibis. Let's seek the truth and travel the long road to justice together. What you know, Alibis? Welcome to another episode of Pretty Lies and Alibis. I'm GiGi. Wednesday, September 21st, my birthday. So I want to thank you guys for all the amazing birthday wishes online. I didn't put anything out there, but I found out when you go to the Twitter page, a bunch of balloons go up, and then a lot of people have inboxed me and sent emails. So, excuse me, thank you. Really brightened my day a whole lot. And so thank you for taking a moment of your time. And I am so cool with turning another year older, 45, and doing what I do and listening to what you guys listen to. We know a lot of people don't have the luxury of getting older. So I'm grateful for every year. All right. Big thank you to Melinda for the donation. Really appreciate that. And our song facts of the day, the top 5 worst songs according to several polls, coming in at number 5, Vanilla Ice, Ice Ice Baby. Number 4, Limp Bizkit, Rollin'. Number 3, Wang Chung, Everybody Have Fun Tonight. Number 2, Billy Ray Cyrus, Achy Breaky Heart. Number 1, Starship, We Built This City. I don't know about number 1. I mean, there were songs. Come on. All right. So day 8, we are at 4199 Union Hill Road, which is Frankie and Hannah Hazel's. So the way they're doing this, oh, by the way, behind me, I always get it wrong. I have added the Rodins and Hannah Gilley to my, it's a victim wall. I hate to call it that, but I want to fill that wall up with cases that I cover. And I've still got to add some that I have covered, but just, I'm not going to put anybody who's responsible for those people up there at all. I don't want them visible in here. I look at them enough on the screen. All right. So the day started off with a recall of Agent Todd Fortner with BCI. If you remember from yesterday, he was initially dispatched to Frankie and Hannah Hazel's, but they sent him over to Chris Senior's and Gary's to do the Pharaoh scanner. I really want to get a video of that on here to show you tomorrow. It's super cool. I want one. Not that I need it, but it's just one of those things that's very neat. So the deputy on scene gave him a briefing and said that the family had went in and removed Ruger from the bed after they found Frankie and Hannah Hazel's bodies. And they changed his diaper on a wooden table right outside the front door. And so it was saturated in blood, as you know. He was laying between his parents. So they gave the diaper to a deputy who put it into an evidence bag, and then it was given to Agent Fortner. They found a knife and a sledgehammer outside the trailer and collected it. They weren't sure if that was really part of the crimes. They bring it into court, though, and give it to Fortner. And then they found a pair of pliers on the steps to the back door. And then examined the back door, and there was no signs of forced entry. So they show a photo of the open window on the back of the trailer. And they talk about some moss and stuff that was disturbed underneath that trailer. Nothing was really said about it that I gathered. It was just mentioned. I guess maybe the defense is going to bring that in at some point. But there's the open window. The red arrow is pointing to a knife right there. And then you could see there's some feed here in a garbage can, and then a tub. There are baby chicks over in the corner that they have under the lights. So that's the open window that kind of comes into play in just a bit. So the defense just doesn't want the body shown on the screen, and they say it's inflammatory, and they keep trying to say that they stipulate, these people were shot to death and it's homicide. But I'm just going to go ahead and throw this in. After lunch, the defense asked for a mistrial, and they cite a prior case arguing that showing photos of the victims, when they're saying they're not disputing the manner or cause of death, and that Jake admitted to shooting them, is not helping their client. Well, obviously. They said George did not enter this room with Hannah and Frankie, although we've heard he entered the house. So he said this is a trial about complicity. Showing the close-ups are trying to gain sympathy from the jury. They want the judge to stop allowing the prosecution to show these gruesome photos. The defense said it evokes anger, and they're going to take that anger out on my client. You have to think about it. George, even if he didn't shoot anybody, he was complicit. And that's what happens when you know of a crime like this and you're a part of it, no matter how much or little you're a part of it. So anyways, he denied that, and the show went on. So on the front porch in the door area, the front door was open when they got there, but we know Bobby Joe had went in and found Frankie and Hannah Hazel and then removed the children from that house. There was a blood stain on the door. It was swabbed, and it was just inconclusive, not enough to get a DNA profile. There were no signs of forced entry on that front door. So inside, there were no overhead lights. I'm going to throw up a picture of Frankie's living room, very cluttered. That seemed to be a problem throughout the investigation inside this house. There was stuff everywhere. I mean, it was just piled all throughout that house. And so the TV was on with cartoons. If you remember, his older son was on the couch asleep when Jake went in, and cartoons were on. He noted the house was cluttered. There was clothing, trash, food everywhere. Nothing of value was found in the living room or the kitchen. So they moved on where they could to the laundry area and the hallway leading to the bedroom where the back door is. So this back door, I'm going to throw a picture up real quick. I'll put the link in the description. If you see this cabinet that has that drawer missing, and then to the left is a garbage bag, that's a door directly in front of that garbage bag. You can kind of see the outline of the frame of where a little, those little tiny windows kind of, where you can just kind of sort of peek out. And they were talking about if someone were standing in this area, which goes down to a hall room or hallway, it would prevent people from getting out of that room or going in. So because the story that we kind of have pieced together is that Jake came in this window, opened the door, and let George and Billy in. So they show the open window with the knife that I just showed you. And they talk about the fact that it's cluttered here. And so you see the feed, you see the little, there's something on the floor. There's just something kind of everywhere. And talk about how nothing was disturbed. So there was a really, really small space where somebody could stand. And I mean, look, Jake is not a big kid. He's small, and I'm sure he's pretty athletic. And I mean, he may have known there was stuff there and to be careful, but there's totally enough room right there for Jake to stand. So then we go into a hallway, and they have some evidence markers down. And what they find is a piece of paper that had a blood stain. He's holding that up in this picture. It's in the very corner. The lab results of that blood stain was a mixture of Frankie and Hannah Hazel. Then placard C, it's hard to see. It's right there in the door frame. There was another drop of blood on the threshold from the hallway into the bedroom where Hannah and Frankie were found. It was just a single drip of blood. And so what they did was they both agree that this drip got there likely when they were removing Ruger from the scene. He was saturated in blood, so clearly some probably dripped off of him. As the agent was standing kind of in the doorway, he could see the scene, he could see the bodies. The room was very bloody, and they believe the blood I'm sorry, I've already said that. The room the bodies were found in was documented with that scanner. He points out things in the photos they found, and it's not seen on screen. The room was cluttered and hard to maneuver in, he said. And also in that room, they showed a picture of an incubator for baby chicks that they had in there. And so, as far as the bodies go, Frankie and Hannah Hazel are in the bed. He just noticed gunshot wounds to the face and the head on both. No obvious wounds on the torso and lots of blood between them. There were also smudges and smears on Hannah Hazel, which would be from Ruger being in between them and moving. And they show the top half of Hannah Hazel, which shows blood on her torso where maybe the baby was touching her after she was dead. She was wearing a nursing bra that was open and she was on her side. So a second picture that they show the jury shows her lower half, and it shows the settling of blood indicating she had not been moved since she was murdered. And he mentioned there was so much clutter at the foot of the bed, nobody could stand there. So the defense, again, when they want to show Frankie's pictures, stipulate, everything. We don't want it to be shown. The judge says, no, we're going to see it. He also mentions, too, that he's watched jurors and nobody seems shocked or anything like that. They point out a family member had to leave the room. The defense does, but the judge allows it. So he said they document wounds as they can be observed without manipulation until that coroner gets there. So they show a picture of Frankie midsection with no wounds. He was laying on his back, and he had pooling on his back, meaning, again, he had not been moved or rolled since the murders. And then they show a photo of just Frankie's head, apparent bullet wound, and what they call raccoon eyes from trauma. So that's when you have trauma inside the skull that the capillaries and the vessels bleed, and you get black eyes that look like raccoon. And so finally the coroner came, and he explained that they will assist the coroner if they need to move the body to be examined on the back for more wounds or any kind of evidence, take photos. They'll help them bag up the bodies and take them out. Again, the defense doesn't want the photo shown. The judge says, okay, we're going to show them. So there's a photo of Hannah Hazel rolled on her side, and they've got her rolled over, and she's in rigor mortis. She's still stiff. So as they roll her over, her arm doesn't move. There is a close-up of her face showing the wounds. And as they're moving her body, they notice a rimfire cartridge casing on the bed, and they go through the ballistics that they found there at the scene. It was kind of long, and I just didn't write all those down. It took 20 minutes or more for him to go through all the ballistics in that room. So on cross, the defense asked Agent Fortner about his past duties as a crime scene evidence collector. And he specifically mentioned shoe print impressions because Fortner did in the very beginning of his testimony say that they had found some prints in the kitchen, and they use what they fingerprint with to actually put that on there. He likes to use magnetic because it's easier to clean up. But ultimately, those shoes were not connected to the crimes, and he didn't even send those off. So he asked what kind of training that Fortner has had lifting prints, but not matching them. And I think he's maybe expecting him to say, well, they taught me on the job. So Fortner says, well, 400 hours of schooling in lifting prints at the National Forensics Academy. And so there's that. The defense refers to the overhead shot and asks if there's a path between Frankie and Chris Sr.'s house. This is an overhead shot of the property, by the way, not the bodies. And he said yes. So then he asks about the open window in the back of the trailer. And he asked about what investigative measures they took at this window. He said not much. The window was swabbed for DNA at a later date. So the open window they talk about, and some of the items would have been knocked over if somebody came through that window. And, um, I mean, I think Jake could have fit. I'll put these pictures up. You can judge for yourself. Jake was skinny. The one thing that both sides stipulate is there were no DNA or fingerprints at all belonging to the Wagners at this scene either. So on recross, prosecution brings up just what I said, which is somebody small could get through the window. And Fortner agrees. Yeah, somebody athletic, small could get through that window. And also that back door that we showed that I'm putting back up here with the red arrow, very hard to see. It swings to the outside and not the inside. So there's some clutter. You can see in that first photo again that beside the dryer, there's that black bag. So they were talking about how it wouldn't have opened all the way inside that trailer. So I really think Jake came in through that window, and then we know he let them in through the front door. So Karen Looman is recalled. She's the forensic examiner from Hamilton County who was on yesterday. I really like her. She's good at what she does. You can tell, and she's very professional. So they did the women first, if you remember, and she had 5 gunshot wounds total. And she was placed in the cooler around 6:07 a.m. It wasn't for long because I believe she was the first autopsy. So they didn't really show any close-ups of these diagrams. I had to kind of grab these as they came and went. And it was only during the defense's cross-exam that they came up. But I grabbed them so you can see at least on Hannah to the left, these shots. So they go through the same thing with Chris and Gary of how photos are taken as soon as they open the body bag. They show a picture of her chest showing that maternity bra. The hooks are open, breast is exposed. She had the nursing bra and the shorts on, both saturated in blood. By the time she got here to have the autopsy done, she was not in rigor mortis, so the body moves again. The problem is when she was killed, her head was kind of dangling down. And so when they put her on the autopsy table to begin, her head would not stay straight. So apparently they had to put some towels around her head to keep it straight. So they took x-rays and she had injuries only to her head. They did a front to back view, just an overall picture. You could see 4 bullets on the right side of the head. And those bullets were deformed because they struck bone. And then there's fragments by the left eye as well as around the bullets where it had just fragmented. A side view x-ray shows 4 to 5 larger pieces of the bullet and also some smaller ones. So number 1, front of the face in the left eye. There's clotted blood and bruising in the picture they're showing because they have not cleaned her up at this point. She also has blood in her mouth due to the fractures in her skull. And so the forensic pathologist explained the sinuses were fractured. And so blood goes down the back of the throat and into her mouth. So that's why she had the presence of blood. And by the way, trigger warning, I forgot to do that about 7 minutes ago. If you don't like graphic autopsy stuff, this might not be the episode for you. They show the close-up of the eye, and it's covered with that clotted blood. And so then they switch to a cleaned up photo that they show the jury. She's got bruising around the eye, and she also has stippling from the gunshot wound. So then they have retractors for eyes, and I did this when I worked in the morgue. It really opens up that eye, and you can see a dry half circle of a gunshot wound to the eye, and the other half circle is the white of the eye. It's a little hard because we didn't see the pictures. The bullet got a little bit of her lower eyelid and into her eye. So the pathologist believes her eyes were mostly closed at the time she was shot. The fact it didn't get her upper eyelid is because she said sometimes either people sleep with their eyes slightly opened, or it could be her eyes were opened and maybe she was just laying there nursing the baby and she was awake. We just don't know. There was no exit wound for that, and the distance was intermediate. So that's anywhere from 3 inches to 3 foot because you have that around the eye that shows, it came in really close contact. The direction of that bullet was left to right and then backwards, and it ended up in the bones behind the right eye. She recovered a projectile from the bone behind that right eye. So number 2 was on the left side of the face, on the forehead. If you look at this left picture, I tried to darken it as much as I could. I believe it's that top hole there. And so the blood and the clot on the head is shown, and then there's blood coming from the left ear. So the pathologist explains when the inner ear is broken, it causes that blood to come out of the ear. The distance was indeterminate, which means 3 feet or more. And the path went across the brain, left to right, and ended up in the right frontal lobe. So you're looking kind of here. And which if you're not on YouTube, which I forget now, I have podcast listeners who don't see what I'm saying, above your eye, your frontal lobe, kind of your forehead. So gunshot wounds 3 and 4 were super close together. It was on the left side above the ear. And so you can see in this left diagram, those 2 shots right there. And they were in such close proximity that they mimic each other in the damage and the path that they take. They almost join paths. And she saw that when she was examining the brain. The distance was 3 feet or more. And the path that these bullets traveled was left to right. There was a bullet found in the temporal lobe on the right side, which is, your temple, kind of your temple. And there were fragments in the skull where it broke the bone and did not exit. Essentially, one was behind the right ear. So number 5 is to the back of her head. And there was a partial exit wound. And what happened is they call this a keyhole wound. I looked it up. It's really interesting. So if a bullet enters at an angle, the way it breaks up, for her, a little piece of lead broke up and exited through the skin before the bullet even went through her skull. So the appearance of the fracture actually looks like a keyhole. And this is the only one that had any type of exit wound out of all the shots to her, and it was partial. The bullet traveled from left to right. The remaining lead ended up in the back of the brain. The other part of the bullet fell out of her hair and ended up on the skin of her back. So she was handed, the forensic pathologist was handled the typical small and kind of bigger manila looking envelopes, fingernail clippings, hair, things of that nature. The projectiles recovered from Hannah Hazel did not match the ones that were recovered from Chris Sr. and Gary Roden. So they were smaller and they didn't have that reg polymer plug that she testified about yesterday. She approximated this was a 22 caliber, which is a lower velocity compared to Chris and Gary. It makes a smaller hole and usually doesn't leave that much damage inside the skull. But when she did the x-rays and the autopsy and saw the damage done to the head, she questioned what type of ammo this was. So she thought there may be a 22 LR, and that's where there's extra gunpowder in the bullet, and it may explain that damage that she saw that you normally don't see with a 22. They also asked about the breast exam to see if she was breastfeeding, and so the defense objects. They don't want this coming in. They say it's not relevant. They don't understand why they're going through such excruciating detail when it's not in question, and they don't dispute it. So they go to a sidebar. Ultimately, the judge overrules it, and the forensic pathologist said her breasts were full and she was lactating, as we know. Toxicology for her, small amount of alcohol, 0.01, and it's likely this is due to decomposition and not anything that she drank. And nothing else is found in her toxicology. So we move on to Frankie. And I believe this, I don't know if this is Frankie's or not. It was so hard to tell, but I think it is because of the cheek wound. So if I'm wrong, let me know in the comments, but this was different from Hannah's. So I can't tell up in the corner if that says Frankie. But so he had face and head injuries only. The x-rays from the side, you see 4 pieces of metal in his head. He was wearing blue boxer shorts, and they show the back of the shorts to the jury, which are saturated in blood. Gunshot wound number 1, right cheek. So that's why I think this is Frankie's picture. It was too blurry to read, but you do see that right cheek wound because the way we're looking at it, as if we're looking down, and that would actually be his right cheek, but to us, it's left. So just didn't want you guys to think I didn't know my left from right. But that's how it goes on these sheets. So it crossed the midline and ended up lodged in the back of his head. The distance of that shot was 3 feet or more. And she also thinks that his head was facing straight up when he received the wound. The projectile recovered from the back of the head on the left side between the brain and the bone. So that's where that wound or that projectile was recovered. Number 2 was on the left side of the temple, and number 3 was on the lower, a little bit lower by the ear, kind of like Hannah Hazel's. They were close in proximity. So the path of both traveled left to right and ended up on the right side of his head, just above his temple. And the bullets were close together. The projectiles were recovered and they were outside of the brain. There were no exit wounds, and it was determined these shots were fired from 3 feet or more. The projectiles were the same caliber and size as the ones used on Hannah Hazel. He had hemorrhages on both sides of the brain and inside the ventricles of the brain. The ventricles are these little pockets, essentially, you have in your brain. And my husband got spinal meningitis and nearly died from it. And he had infection in the ventricles of his brain. So it's just, it's almost like a little divot, not divot, but, it's a place where things can collect, I guess. So laceration and perforations of the brain. He had a hemorrhage in his right eye from the trauma behind the eye from a gunshot wound. And toxicology with him, same small amount of alcohol from decomposition. And he was slightly more decomposed than Hannah. And they sort of explained that because with Hannah being small, she was 133 pounds, I think. Rigor mortis sets in quicker. But when you're somebody who's a little bigger, you keep your body temperature longer, which helps that decomposition, if I understood correctly. So that was pretty much all from them. Hannah Hazel got, I think, the second most gunshots of any of the 8. And I've wondered why. And the only thing I can think is that she is the sister of Charlie Gilley, who is the biological father of Hannah Mae's 5-day-old baby that was laying there with her when she was found murdered. That was overkill. We saw it with Chris Sr., we see it with Hannah Hazel. So if I believe Jake killed her. So it's interesting, why her? Seems like she was more collateral damage because she was there, but that was a lot of shots. So anyways, that was pretty much all today. There were some little things here and there about, just I wanted to get the most important parts, and that was kind of it, which was everything was really just centered in that bedroom. The babies, thank goodness, are okay to this day. And the one thing we don't know is where Sophia or the newborn ended up. So not sure where they are. I don't think they've ever said, but hopefully they're doing great. I think I did read that she is doing great. And you think about it, these murders happened in 2016. So she would be, she's not a baby anymore. I mean, you're looking at 9 years old, maybe. I don't know, just top of my head. Or, yeah, 8 or 9, because she was 2 or 3 when this happened. And then the little bitty baby is 6. So all this over custody, and what? Like, the kids aren't with either parent, and they're all going to prison. And most importantly, 8 people were brutally murdered. Hearing these crime scene descriptions, not being able to see. My buddy Big E, Chasing Paper 89 on Twitter, had to look away when they were doing the photos of Hannah again. And believe me, we've swapped some crime scene photos of cases that we've covered, and he can look at them, but the brutality is on another level. So anyways, that's all for today, you guys. Tomorrow, I'm going to do it again. I think Tomorrow will be Dana, Little Chris, and Hannah Mae. That may take more than a day because this took a day and this is 2 victims in one room. And tomorrow, this is the most number of victims in one place out of all of the crime scenes. And so maybe a day and a half on tomorrow. I'm not sure, but I'll bring you the best of testimony tomorrow evening. Thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you soon.
With no fees or minimums and no overdraft fees, banking with Capital One is the easiest decision in the history of decisions. Even easier than choosing to keep the Grinch away from the toy drive.
Who's going to deliver the toys to the kids?
What about me, the Grinch?
No.
Yep, even easier than that.
You steal the presents one time.
With no fees or minimums and no overdraft fees, is it even a decision? That's banking reimagined. What's in your wallet?
Terms apply. Capital One NA, member FDIC. Copyright Dr. Seuss Enterprises. Copyright Turner Entertainment Company.
Lucky Land Casino, asking people, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
Lucky? In line at the deli, I guess?
Aha, in my dentist's office. More than once, actually.
Do I have to say?
Yes, you do.
In the car before my kids' PTA meeting.
Really?
Yes.
Excuse me, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
I never win and tell.
Well, there you have it. You can get lucky anywhere, playing at LuckyLandSlots.com. Play for free right now. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.